The wind howled across the endless white plains of Antarctica, biting at every exposed inch of skin. The research team trudged through knee-deep snow, their heavy boots crunching against the icy surface. Dr. Laura Hayes adjusted her goggles and glanced back at Daniel Brooks, who was struggling to carry a bulky piece of equipment. His breath came out in short puffs, visible in the freezing air. "Daniel, take a break if you need to," Laura called out, her voice muffled by the cold. "No way," he replied, shaking his head. "We've been searching for months. If this is it, I'm not slowing down now." Months earlier, satellite scans had picked up strange readings beneath the ice, a massive structure buried deep under centuries of snow and frost. At first, they thought it might be a natural formation, but as they dug deeper, the truth became undeniable. This was no ordinary discovery, it was man-made. Finally, after hours of drilling and melting through layers of ice, they reached it. A smooth metallic surface gleamed faintly under the harsh glare of their floodlights. Laura's heart raced as she ran her gloved hand over the material. It felt cold, yet somehow alive, like it was humming with energy. "Do you see this?" Daniel whispered, pointing to a series of intricate carvings along the edge of the structure. They looked ancient, almost alien, but there was something undeniably human about them too. They worked quickly, uncovering more of the structure until they found what appeared to be an entrance. With great effort, they managed to pry it open, revealing a long corridor that stretched into darkness. Inside, the air was eerily still, untouched by time. Their flashlights revealed walls lined with strange symbols and rows upon rows of cylindrical pods. "What are these?" Laura murmured, stepping closer to one of the pods. Inside, suspended in some kind of liquid, was a figure. Human, perfectly preserved. She moved to another pod, and then another. Each contained a person, men and women, all frozen in stasis. "This can't be real," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "How could anyone survive like this for so long?" Before Laura could respond, a soft hiss filled the air. One of the pods began to glow, its surface shimmering as if waking from a long slumber. Both scientists froze, watching in stunned silence as the glass slid upward, releasing a cloud of vapor. The figure inside stirred, slowly opening his eyes. He blinked several times, adjusting to the light. Then, without warning, he sat up, water spilling onto the floor. His movements were fluid, graceful even, despite the fact that he had just awakened from what must have been centuries of sleep. He looked around, taking in the unfamiliar faces and equipment before focusing on Laura. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Laura hesitated, unsure where to begin. "You're in Antarctica. We found you here, frozen underground." The man frowned, confusion flickering across his face. "Antarctica? That doesn't make sense." He paused, closing his eyes for a moment as if trying to recall something important. When he opened them again, his expression hardened. "My name is Ethan, and I think you've made a very big mistake waking me up." Laura exchanged a nervous glance with Daniel. Whatever Ethan was, whatever purpose he served, it was clear he wasn't just an ordinary man. As he stepped out of the pod, his muscles flexed with strength that seemed impossible for someone who had been lying dormant for millennia. There was an intensity in his gaze, a readiness, as though he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. And maybe, Laura thought, he had. Ethan stood under the bright lights of the research facility, his bare feet cold against the steel floor. He wore a plain gray jumpsuit provided by the scientists, but it did little to make him feel comfortable. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. The monitors displaying data he didn't understand, the people whispering nervously as they worked, and the cameras mounted high on the walls, tracking his every move. Dr. Laura Hayes sat across from him at a small table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. She had introduced herself earlier, explaining that she was part of the team that found him buried beneath the ice. Ethan listened quietly, though much of what she said made no sense. Words like satellite scans and cryogenic preservation were foreign to him. Still, he nodded politely, pretending to follow along while his mind raced with questions. "So," Laura began hesitantly, breaking the silence, "do you remember anything? Anything at all?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Bits and pieces," he admitted after a moment. "I remember being trained, fighting, surviving, but everything else is foggy." He paused, glancing down at his hands. They were strong, calloused, built for combat. "Whatever I was before, I think I was made for something important." Laura nodded slowly, jotting notes onto a clipboard. "Based on what we found so far, you might have been part of some kind of elite group. Maybe soldiers, maybe protectors. We're still trying to piece it together." "Protecting what?" Ethan asked sharply, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. "That's the thing. We don't know yet." Laura sighed, rubbing her temples. "But whatever it was, it must have been serious enough to put you in stasis for thousands of years." The idea unsettled Ethan. Thousands of years. It seemed impossible. Yet here he was, standing in a world he barely recognized. Outside the window, machines roared as vehicles moved across the icy landscape. Inside the facility, screens displayed images and words that looked nothing like the language he vaguely remembered. Everything felt strange, overwhelming. Daniel Brooks entered the room carrying a tray of food. He set it down in front of Ethan with a nervous smile. "Thought you might be hungry." Ethan stared at the plate. Strange-smelling meat, vegetables he didn't recognize, and bread that looked soft, but tasted dry when he took a bite. He forced himself to eat, knowing his body needed fuel, even if the flavors were unfamiliar. As the days passed, Ethan spent most of his time observing the researchers. They treated him with cautious curiosity, running tests to measure his strength, reflexes, and mental acuity. To their astonishment, Ethan surpassed every benchmark they threw at him. His physical abilities were unmatched, and his instincts were razor-sharp. Yet despite his prowess, there was something haunting about him, a quiet sadness behind his piercing gaze. One night, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered the halls of the facility. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as he walked past rows of empty rooms and locked doors. Eventually, he stumbled upon a lab where Laura was working late. She looked up, startled, when she saw him standing in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently. Ethan shook his head. "Too many thoughts. Too much noise." She gestured for him to come closer. On the desk in front of her was a collection of artifacts recovered from the frozen structure, carvings, fragments of metal, and shards of glass etched with symbols. "We've been studying these," she explained. "They seem to tell a story about war, about survival." Ethan picked up one of the carvings, turning it over in his hands. The symbol engraved on its surface sent a jolt of recognition through him. Memories flashed in his mind. Explosions, screams, the heat of battle. He clenched his fists, forcing the images away. "What does it mean?" he asked, his voice tight. "We're not sure yet," Laura admitted, "but it feels like a warning. Something big is coming, Ethan. Something bad." For the first time since waking up, Ethan felt a spark of clarity. Whatever he had been created for, whatever purpose he'd been frozen to fulfill, it wasn't over. Not yet. And deep down, he knew he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the truth. Ethan spent the next few days learning about the world he had awakened in. Laura and Daniel tried their best to explain things, but much of it was overwhelming. Cars that moved without horses, machines that spoke, and glowing screens that showed moving pictures. It all seemed like magic to him. Yet, despite how strange everything felt, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The people around him were softer, slower, more reliant on tools than on themselves. It made him uneasy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the icy plains outside, Laura called Ethan into her office. She looked tired, her eyes red from lack of sleep. On the desk in front of her was a stack of papers covered in scribbles and diagrams. A map of the world hung on the wall behind her, dotted with small red marks. "We've been digging deeper," she said, motioning for him to sit, "and we think we know why you were put into stasis." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Laura hesitated before answering. "It looks like your kind wasn't just created to fight wars. You were built to stop something. Something catastrophic." "Like what?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. She pointed to one of the papers. It showed sketches of strange ships, long, sleek, and unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. "These are designs etched into the artifacts we found near your pod. We believe they belong to visitors from space." The room fell silent. Ethan stared at the drawings, his mind racing. Space. Visitors? None of it made sense, but at the same time, it felt familiar, like a distant memory tugging at the edges of his consciousness. "That's not all," Laura continued. "There's evidence suggesting these visitors came here once before, thousands of years ago. And when they did, humanity nearly didn't survive." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Are you saying I was left behind to deal with them if they came back?" Laura nodded slowly. "That's exactly what we're saying. Whoever made you must have known this day would come. They prepared you for it." A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room. The weight of what Laura was telling him pressed heavily on his shoulders. If she was right, then his awakening wasn't an accident. It was destiny. But why now? What had changed? Later that night, Ethan lay awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him as his thoughts spiraled. He closed his eyes, trying to focus, and suddenly, flashes of images filled his mind. He saw himself standing on a battlefield, surrounded by others who looked like him. Strong, fast, fearless. Above them loomed massive ships descending from the sky. Beams of light cut through the air, obliterating everything in their path. He jolted upright, sweat dripping down his face. Was it a dream? Or a memory? Either way, it left him shaken. The next morning, Ethan approached Laura again. "I need answers," he said firmly. "Not theories. Facts." She nodded, understanding the urgency in his tone. Together, they returned to the lab. This time, she pulled up files on a computer screen. "We've been analyzing the symbols on the artifacts. Some of them seem to predict events, like warnings. Here," she pointed to a series of numbers. "This could be a date. In our calendar system, it translates to less than 6 months from now." Ethan's heart sank. 6 months. That wasn't much time. "There's more," Laura added quietly. "We think there might be others like you, other pods hidden in different parts of the world. If we can find them, maybe we can figure out the full plan." Ethan clenched his fists. Others like him. Warriors frozen in time, waiting to be awakened. The thought gave him hope, but also fear. What if they weren't ready? What if it was already too late? As he left the lab, Ethan glanced out the window at the endless expanse of ice. Buried beneath its surface were secrets older than civilization itself, secrets that now rested in his hands. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't do it alone. Ethan stood at the edge of the icy plain, his breath visible in the freezing air. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow. He had spent hours staring out into the vast emptiness, trying to make sense of everything Laura had told him. 6 months. That was all the time they had before something catastrophic happened. Something that could destroy humanity. The thought weighed heavily on him, but there was no room for doubt. He had been awakened for a reason, and he couldn't afford to waste a single moment. The idea of others like him, warriors frozen in stasis somewhere else in the world, gave him a glimmer of hope. If he could find them, maybe together they could uncover the truth about their purpose. But where to start? Laura approached him, her boots crunching softly against the snow. She held a tablet in her hands, its screen glowing faintly. "We've narrowed down some locations," she said, handing it to him. On the screen were maps marked with red dots scattered across the globe. Antarctica, Siberia, the Sahara Desert, even deep beneath the ocean near the Mariana Trench. "These are places where similar readings have been detected," she explained. "It's possible more pods are hidden there." Ethan studied the map carefully, his sharp eyes scanning each location. "How do we know these aren't just guesses?" he asked. "They're not guesses," Laura replied firmly. "We compared the energy signatures from your pod to other anomalies recorded over the years. These spots match perfectly." Ethan nodded, though skepticism lingered in his mind. Even if these locations held answers, reaching them wouldn't be easy. Each place came with its own challenges: extreme weather, dangerous terrain, or miles of open water. And time was running out. As if on cue, a figure appeared in the distance. At first, Ethan thought it was one of the researchers returning from an errand, but as the person drew closer, he realized it wasn't anyone from the team. It was a woman, dressed in dark clothing that blended with the shadows. Her movements were smooth, deliberate, almost predatory. "Who's that?" Ethan asked, narrowing his eyes. Laura turned to look, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. "I don't know her. She shouldn't be here." The woman stopped a few feet away, her piercing gaze locking onto Ethan. "You're awake," she said simply, her voice carrying a strange mix of relief and tension. "And you are?" Ethan asked, stepping forward cautiously. "My name is Ava," she replied. "I was part of your unit. Or at least, I used to be." Ethan frowned, studying her face. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place it. "You were frozen too." Ava shook her head. "No, I was left behind when the others were put into stasis. I've been waiting for this day, for you to wake up." Laura stepped between them, her tone wary. "Wait a minute. How do we know we can trust her?" "You don't," Ava admitted bluntly. "But if you want to survive what's coming, you'll need me." Ethan crossed his arms, his instincts telling him to tread carefully. "Why should I believe you?" Ava reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, a metallic disc etched with symbols identical to those found in the artifacts. "Because I know things you don't," she said, holding it up. "Things about our creators, about why we were made, and about the enemy we're supposed to fight." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind picked up, swirling around them as the temperature dropped further. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Tell me everything." Ava hesitated, then nodded. "Not here. Somewhere private." They returned to the facility, where Ava began explaining what she knew. According to her, their creators weren't just humans. They were scientists who had seen the future. They foresaw an alien invasion so devastating that humanity would crumble without help. So they created warriors, genetically enhanced soldiers designed to defend Earth. But the aliens never arrived, or so everyone thought. "What changed?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. Ava's expression darkened. "The aliens are coming now. And this time, they won't stop until they've taken everything." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. For the first time since waking up, he truly understood the weight of his mission. But with Ava's knowledge, and possibly others like her, he felt a flicker of hope. Together, they might stand a chance. Ethan sat in a dimly lit room, his elbows resting on the table as he listened intently to Ava. Her words painted a grim picture, a future where humanity would be overrun by an unstoppable alien force. The thought of such destruction weighed heavily on him, but it also fueled his determination. He wasn't just a relic from the past. He was humanity's last hope. "So, what's the plan?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. "If there are others like us out there, we need to find them. Fast." Ava nodded, pulling out a map similar to the one Laura had shown earlier. She pointed to several locations marked with red dots. These are the sites I've been tracking. If our creators followed the same pattern when hiding the pods, these spots should hold the answers we need. Laura leaned forward, studying the map closely. That's consistent with what we've found so far. But reaching these places won't be easy. Some of them are in hostile environments. Deserts, frozen wastelands, underwater trenches. We don't have a choice, Ethan said firmly. If we're going to stop what's coming, we'll do whatever it takes. The group agreed to split up the search efforts. Laura and her team would focus on analyzing data and coordinating logistics, while Ethan and Ava prepared for the first mission. Their destination: a remote region in Siberia, where energy readings suggested another pod might be buried beneath layers of permafrost. Before leaving, Ethan spent hours training, pushing his body to its limits. He practiced hand-to-hand combat, tested new weapons provided by the research team, and studied maps of the area. Despite his confidence, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of his mind. What if they were too late? What if the others weren't ready? On the day of departure, the air was tense. Ethan stood outside the facility, adjusting the straps of his gear as Ava approached. She carried a backpack filled with supplies and tools, her expression unreadable. "Ready?" she asked, her voice steady. "As I'll ever be," Ethan replied, though his tone betrayed a hint of unease. Their journey began with a long flight to Russia, followed by a grueling trek through the icy wilderness. The temperature plummeted as they ventured deeper into the frozen expanse, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Every step was exhausting, but neither of them complained. They were driven by a shared purpose: to uncover the truth and awaken the warriors who could save humanity. After days of travel, they reached the coordinates Ava had identified. Using specialized equipment, they scanned the ground, searching for signs of the hidden structure. It didn't take long before the device emitted a faint beep, indicating something buried beneath the ice. "This is it," Ava said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. They worked quickly, using drills and heaters to melt through the thick layer of frost. As the surface gave way, a metallic glimmer appeared. Ethan's heart raced as they uncovered the entrance to another chamber, identical to the one where he had been found. Inside, rows of pods lined the walls, each containing a figure suspended in stasis. Ethan moved closer, examining the faces of those inside. One pod caught his attention: a man with sharp features and a muscular build. The glass slid open with a hiss, and the man slowly opened his eyes. "Where am I?" he groaned, sitting up. "You're safe," Ethan said, extending a hand to help him out. "My name's Ethan. You've been asleep for a long time." The man blinked, disoriented, but quickly regained his composure. "Ryan," he said, introducing himself. "I remember. Fragments. Training. Fighting. Is the war still going?" Ethan exchanged a glance with Ava. "Not yet, but it's coming." Over the next few hours, they awakened two more warriors: a woman named Mia, who moved with the grace of a predator, and a burly man called Jake, whose hands looked built for destruction. Each of them shared fragmented memories of their past lives, but all felt the same pull toward duty and survival. As the group gathered together, Ethan explained the situation. "We were created for a reason," he said, his voice firm. "Something big is coming, an enemy unlike anything humanity has faced before. We need to prepare, together." Mia stepped forward, her piercing gaze locking onto Ethan. "Tell us what to do." For the first time since waking up, Ethan felt a spark of hope. They weren't alone anymore. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a team. The newly awakened warriors stood in a circle, their breaths visible in the cold air of the Siberian chamber. Ethan watched them carefully, gauging their reactions as he explained the gravity of their situation. Ryan crossed his arms, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if already strategizing. Maya leaned against a wall, her movements calm but deliberate, like a predator ready to strike. Jake cracked his knuckles, his imposing frame radiating raw power. "So let me get this straight," Ryan said, breaking the silence. "We're supposed to stop aliens from destroying Earth, aliens that might already be on their way." "That's right," Ethan replied, his tone steady. "We don't have much time. If we want to survive, we need to act fast." Mia stepped forward, her voice low and measured. "What about weapons? Training? We can't just walk into a fight blind." "We'll handle that," Ava interjected, stepping beside Ethan. "Laura and her team are working on gear for us. They're combining modern tech with what they've learned from the artifacts. But first, we need to find the rest of our unit. There are more pods out there." Jake let out a grunt, shaking his head. "This feels wrong. Like we're missing something. Why were we frozen in the first place? Why not stay awake and prepare?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how to answer. The question had been nagging at him too. He glanced at Ava, who avoided his gaze. Clearly, she knew more than she was letting on, but now wasn't the time to press her. "Focus on what we can control," Ethan said finally. "Right now, that means finding the others and getting ready. Once we're all together, we'll figure out the rest." The group nodded, though tension lingered in the air. They packed up their supplies and made their way back to the surface, where a helicopter waited to transport them to the next location. This time, their target was deep in the Sahara Desert, a harsh, unforgiving landscape that tested even Ethan's endurance. As they flew over endless dunes, the heat pressing against the windows of the aircraft, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It started small, a flicker of movement on the horizon, a shadow darting across the sand. But soon it became impossible to ignore. Something was following them. When they landed, the group moved quickly, setting up equipment to locate the buried structure. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the desert into an oven. Sweat dripped down their faces as they worked, but none of them complained. They were built for this, trained to endure. It didn't take long to find the site. Beneath the scorching sands lay another chamber, its entrance marked by faint energy readings. As they uncovered it, Ethan noticed something unusual, scratch marks around the edges, as if someone had tried to break in before. "Looks like we're not the first ones here," Ryan muttered, inspecting the damage. Before anyone could respond, a loud hum filled the air. A metallic object descended from the sky, hovering above them. It wasn't human-made. Its sleek design and glowing lights left no doubt. It was alien. "Get down," Ethan shouted, pulling Mia behind a rock as a beam of light shot past them, narrowly missing Jake. The group scrambled for cover, their instincts kicking in. Ryan grabbed a rifle from his pack, firing at the craft with precision. Jake hurled a makeshift explosive, causing the vessel to wobble. For a moment, it seemed like they might drive it away. But then, the ship unleashed a second attack. Ova cursed under her breath. "This isn't a full invasion. It's a probe. They're testing us." Ethan gritted his teeth, realizing she was right. The aliens weren't here to conquer yet. They were gathering information, and they had chosen the worst possible moment to strike. With a final burst of effort, the group managed to disable the probe, sending it crashing into the sand. As the dust settled, Ethan looked at his teammates, their faces streaked with sweat and dirt. "This is just the beginning," he said grimly. "They know we're here. Next time, they won't send a scout." No one argued. They all understood the stakes. Whatever came next, they would face it together, or not at all. Back at the research facility, the group gathered in a large briefing room. The walls were covered with maps, diagrams, and photos of the alien probe they had encountered in the desert. Laura stood at the front, her face pale but determined as she addressed the warriors. "That probe wasn't just observing us," she said, pointing to a series of images on a screen. "It was collecting data, scanning your movements, analyzing your abilities. If we don't act quickly, they'll use that information against us." Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "How long do we have?" Laura hesitated before answering. Weeks, maybe less. Once they process what they've learned, they'll send something bigger, something we might not be able to stop. The room fell silent. Each of the warriors processed the news differently. Ryan tapped his fingers on the table, his mind clearly working through strategies. Mia stared at the screen, her expression unreadable but intense. Jake clenched his fists, his frustration evident. Ava remained quiet, her arms crossed as if shielding herself from the weight of the situation. We need more than just weapons, Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. We need to train harder, sharpen our skills, use everything we've got. Mia nodded, speaking up for the first time. Agreed. But modern tools won't cut it against an enemy like this. We need something stronger, something designed for them. Laura stepped closer, holding up a small device that glowed faintly. That's where this comes in. It's a piece of alien tech we recovered from the probe. With some adjustments, we can integrate it into your gear, weapons, armor, even communication systems. Ryan raised an eyebrow. You're saying we fight fire with fire? Exactly, Laura replied. But it won't be easy. Modifying this tech will take time, and we'll need to test it thoroughly before using it in the field. Jake cracked his knuckles, a hint of excitement in his voice. Then let's get started. Over the next few days, the facility buzzed with activity. Ethan and his team trained relentlessly, pushing themselves to their limits. They practiced combat drills, tested prototypes of hybrid weapons, and studied every scrap of alien technology Laura could provide. The researchers worked around the clock, reverse engineering the probe's components and incorporating them into new tools tailored to the warrior's unique abilities. Despite the progress, tension simmered beneath the surface. Eva kept her distance, avoiding eye contact with Ethan whenever possible. Her secrecy gnawed at him, but he didn't press her. Not yet. There were more pressing matters to focus on. One evening, after hours of sparring with Mia, Ethan found himself alone in the gym. His muscles ached, but his mind refused to rest. He replayed the encounter with the alien probe over and over, searching for weaknesses, patterns, anything that might give them an edge. That's when Ava walked in. You should be resting, she said, her tone softer than usual. So should you, Ethan replied, wiping sweat from his brow. What do you want, Ava? She hesitated, then sat down on a nearby bench. I owe you the truth about why I was left behind. Ethan turned to face her, his expression hardening. Go on. When the others were frozen, I stayed awake because I was supposed to monitor Earth's progress, to make sure humanity evolved enough to stand a chance against the invaders. But she paused, her voice trembling slightly. I failed. Over time, I lost faith in humanity. Wars, greed, corruption. It all seemed pointless. So when the pods were buried, I disappeared. I thought it was over. Ethan listened silently, letting her words sink in. And now, Ava met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. Now I see I was wrong. Humanity isn't perfect, but it's worth fighting for. And so are you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan nodded slowly. Good, because we're going to need everyone we can trust. As Ava left the room, Ethan returned to his training, his resolve stronger than ever. Whatever came next, they would face it head-on. Together. The days passed quickly as the warriors prepared for the inevitable. The facility buzzed with activity, a mix of urgency and determination driving everyone forward. Ethan led the charge, ensuring that every member of the team was ready, not just physically, but mentally. They trained together, ate together, and even shared stories from their fragmented memories, piecing together glimpses of their past lives. But not everything went smoothly. Ava's confession had eased some of the tension between her and Ethan, yet she still kept to herself more often than not. Her sudden reappearance in their lives left questions unanswered, and Ryan, ever the tactician, wasn't satisfied with vague explanations. She's hiding something, Ryan muttered one evening as he cleaned his weapon. He glanced at Ethan, who was sitting nearby, studying a map of Earth marked with alien activity hotspots. You trust her? Ethan looked up, his expression unreadable. I don't have a choice. We need all the help we can get. Ryan frowned but didn't push further. Instead, he focused on sharpening his blade, the metallic scrape echoing through the quiet room. Meanwhile, Laura and her team worked tirelessly to enhance the warrior's gear. Using the alien tech recovered from the probe, they created hybrid weapons capable of emitting energy pulses strong enough to disable advanced machinery. They also developed lightweight armor reinforced with materials derived from the probe's structure. Every piece of equipment was customized to suit each warrior's unique strengths. Despite these advancements, time was slipping away. Reports poured in from around the world, strange lights in the sky, unexplained phenomena, and increasing seismic activity near areas where alien structures were suspected to be hidden. It was clear the invasion was imminent. One night, as the group reviewed their plans, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Ethan sprang to his feet, grabbing his weapon instinctively. What's happening? Millennia demanded, already moving toward the exit. Laura rushed into the room, her face pale. It's them. Multiple ships entering Earth's atmosphere. They're heading straight for us. Get everyone to safety, Ethan ordered, turning to the others. We'll hold them off. Ava stepped forward, her voice firm. No, this isn't just about protecting the facility anymore. If we don't stop them now, they'll destroy everything. Ethan hesitated for a moment before nodding. Then let's move. The group raced outside, where the sky glowed ominously with streaks of green and purple light. Massive alien vessels descended rapidly, their shapes sleek and menacing. Smaller crafts broke away from the main fleet, firing beams of energy that tore through the ice and snow. Spread out, Ethan shouted, diving behind cover as an explosion rocked the ground nearby. Mia, flank them. Jake, focus on disabling their weapons. The battle erupted in chaos. Ryan coordinated attacks with precision, using his rifle to target vulnerable spots on the enemy ships. Mia moved like a shadow, striking swiftly and disappearing before the aliens could react. Jake unleashed explosives with devastating force, creating craters that slowed the advancing forces. Amidst the fighting, Ava worked furiously to hack into one of the downed probes, hoping to extract critical data. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as Ethan guarded her position, taking down any alien drones that came too close. We're running out of time, Ava yelled over the noise. Their mothership is charging some kind of weapon. Ethan gritted his teeth, scanning the battlefield. The odds were against them, but giving up wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. Suddenly, Ava gasped. I've got it. I've accessed their systems. If we can overload their core, we might be able to cripple the entire fleet. How? Ethan asked, dodging a blast of energy. There's a weak point, a central hub aboard the mothership, but someone will have to go inside to trigger the overload. Ethan locked eyes with her. Then I'll do it. No, Ava said sharply. It has to be me. I'm the only one who understands their technology well enough. Before Ethan could argue, Ava sprinted toward a nearby transport ship, climbing aboard without looking back. As the craft lifted off, Ethan clenched his fists, watching it disappear into the sky. Let's finish this, he growled, turning back to the fight. Together, they fought harder than ever, buying Ava the time she needed to carry out her mission.